Okay, so we're a little late to the party with the 9950X3D. No excuses other than we have been so busy with GPU testing that took a little break from the testing stuff. And yeah, we'll talk about this graphics card in a second here. Don't get caught up on that. That's for reviving the RIP GN, which you guys will see in a very upcoming video. But 9950X3D is here, and it looks to be the new gaming king. Today's video is brought to you by the new, really super cool JSUSense Melty connector shirt. You know, paying tribute to one of the best designs that's clearly ever existed. And if you don't like the Vaporwave colors, we've got our OG gray and red colors available now. So get yours by following the link in the description below.
Nice.
Ow, I have a thigh cramp. I'm not gonna be reviewing the CPU in a traditional sense. Like, I'm not gonna run it through a bunch of tests and stuff. To be honest, there's a lot of amazing content that's already out there from the usual suspects. You know, you got Hardware Canucks, you got Hardware Unboxed, you got Gamers Nexus, you got Linus, you got all the usual people that do, obviously you got Digital Foundry, you've got a lot of guys that do very deep dive on this. There is one aspect of this particular CPU that I think is gonna affect 9900X3D and 9950X3D, and hopefully 9900X and 9950X, that I'm very interested in testing today on my GPU test bench. And that is specifically the built-in software now with the latest chipset drivers that is going to self-identify what CPU is installed and the current configuration that is supposed to allow it to automatically provision the operating system and drivers and such so that core parking no longer becomes a problem when switching from a CPU that does not core park up to a core parking CPU. Now, I did a video last year that actually got pretty popular, where I showed the problem with core parking, how it was still broken, because 9900X and 9950X, which are non-X3D CPUs, also utilize core parking, just because of the latency between handing off the task between the CCDs was affecting gaming in a negative way. So AMD, and that's true for the 7900X and 7950X had the same problem. They would hand off amongst CCDs, which was not ideal. So with the 9000 series, they made it so that all games would just park on one core. Doesn't matter which core it was, they were identical. They were symmetrical cores. So they were just two 8-core, 16-thread CCDs, and there's two of them connected on a substrate. And then you would have the Infinity Fabric that would lock everything together. And then what would happen is, if that task got moved around and bounced around, as the scheduler likes to do, if it moved across CCDs, then it would increase latency and it could cause stutters and other things in gaming. So AMD said, fine. We will park all games on one CCD, usually CCD 0, because CCD 0 tends to have usually the best single core in it, and then the scheduler would have to handle all that. And then the problem was, if you ran a CPU prior to having a core parking CPU that does not use core parking, even if you installed the latest chipsets and chipset drivers and such, it would not add the DLL file, which would be required for it to utilize Xbox Game Bar to identify that it's a game being played, to force the affinity of that game onto the X3D CCD. So the recommendation from AMD was always start from scratch, a brand new Windows install. Now, if you're like me and you've had the same Windows install for a very long time, a lot of software set up, maybe you've got your fan control stuff all set up, maybe you've got lighting stuff all set up, you've got all your games installed, maybe you've got sensor panel stuff, AIDA64, like, it can start to get very, very complex and convoluted and time consuming to reset that up. The prospect of wiping Windows off your drive and starting all over again was an extreme turnoff. So that's a very long way of saying AMD says they fixed that with the 9000 series CPUs, specifically 9950X3D, 9900X3D, that it should automatically now provision Windows to do the right thing and put it onto the core, the right CCD. So what we have here, this is actually our GPU test bench. It runs a 9800X3D, which is a single CCD, a very old EK, very grimy looking cooler, which we'll be changing all this out soon with the new Light Loop 3s from, or Silent Loop 3s from Be Quiet. Anyway, this has a single drive on it. It has all of our games and everything on here. Even has a note, GPU bench only, do not make changes. It is very important when we're doing our GPU testing that everything stay locked and consistent with the CPU, the frequencies and all that sort of stuff. So this could screw me very badly right now if for some reason installing this and the latest chipsets and the latest BIOS, in fact, even changing the BIOS right now, can screw our results moving forward and make all of our previous results null, unless we go and spot check our testing to make sure that the numbers haven't changed. So what I need to do right now is I'm gonna fire up this bench. I'm gonna make sure I know which BIOS is on here, because I'm gonna have to put this back exactly as it is, because this is not going to be our GPU testing CPU. We have to stay with the 9800X3D. If I change the CPU and it changes the results, even the 2 or 3% higher on average, all of our results have to be tested again. I just spent over 2 months straight, every single day, doing some level of GPU testing. I'm not doing that again by forcing myself to have to do it by changing the CPU. So, with that said, I don't know why I took this off, because I actually need it. Yeah, I know you guys are probably already looking at this and going, but Jay, the Asus, blah, blah, blah. I did not get this from Asus. I paid full retail for this. I actually called in a favor from an SI. I'm not gonna mention who, because I don't want anyone to get in any trouble. I actually was able to buy this, and I'm using it specifically for RipGN. I watched the Gamers Nexus live stream with him and Bearded Hardware, and all in good fun, all the shit talking that takes place. We haven't done RipGN in a couple of generations, so we're bringing that back. This is my answer to that. And this is one of the only graphics cards that's capable of actually providing us the level of overclocking and sustainability we need in the frequencies. So I had to measure the level of evil, right? And this is the card it takes. Although, at the time of filming this video, Galax has entered the chat, and now Galax is the top 5 on the board. So it's gonna be interesting now to see how well we can keep up with those cards which are designed for LN2 overclocking and probably fully unlocked and stuff, which these are not. But one thing I will do in today's video is I will compare my 3D Mark scores I was getting with this prior to using the 9950X3D and see if we get any sort of uplift in score, because right now, Port Royal and all that, especially almost said Steel Magnolias, Steel Nomad is loving clock speed. So this having a higher clock on the 3D V-Cache side than the 9800X3D does, which is 150 megahertz higher, goes from, or 250, it goes from 5.3 to 5.5, or 5.55 technically, 5,550 megahertz. We should see an actual improvement. So that's the point of today's video. I just spent like 10 minutes explaining. I think the scariest part of this whole process for us is gonna be actually flashing this BIOS. The one that's included from AMD is 3.17. We're on 3.15. Obviously, if you're not aware of like the ASRock and 9800X3D stuff that's been kind of happening, it's not very widespread, but it's widespread enough to where it's become a video for a lot of people. We've been running 3.15 since the moment we got this board and 9800X3D and ran quite literally thousands of GPU runs on it without having any sort of problems, including overclocking our 9800X3D. The problem seems to happen when people update their BIOS. So I'm really hoping we don't get screwed by this right now in more than one way. So anyway, I'm gonna be updating right now from 3.15 to 3.17. I don't want to just plop in the 950X3D and have it not post or something and then have to swap it back again. So I'm just trying to save myself time by flashing the BIOS first. I'm kind of doing this in what I feel like would be the consumer way that people are doing it. You got a CPU that is not core parking or an X3D, well, it's technically an X3D, but it's a single CCD. And it's like, oh, okay, I got the new CPU, I want to put it in, and what's the process? So I'm following that process to make sure it all works smoothly. That's the whole idea here. Okay, well, good news is after the after the BIOS update, it booted. That's always a good sign. So now I got to go in and set my, well, I guess there's no point in setting my BIOS settings back to the way they were, because as soon as I change the CPU, it's going to redo it anyway. But I at least want to get into the BIOS, confirm that it says 3.17. Yeah, 3.17.TSO3. That might literally be designating that this is like an engineering BIOS because it is a pre-release. So I don't know. I'll probably, to be fair, I'll probably roll back to 3.15 and put the 9800X3D back in when we're done, just because I need to put this test rig back exactly as it has been for all of our testing that we did. Okay, so following along in the consumer workflow here, so it's memory training. I truly want to see if there's any performance uplift going with this CPU, because realistically, the 9950 X3D, if you look at just the X3D side or the 3D Vcache side, it's a faster 9800 X3D. It's like a 9850 X3D because it does have a faster, it flashed for a second. It does have a faster clock speed than the 9800 X3D, but it also has the 5.7 gigahertz side of the standard, there it goes, of the standard CCD. Come on, don't go to Windows. So what I was trying to say there as I was getting distracted by this is that the X3D side or the 3D Vcache for gaming is faster than a 9800 X3D clockwise, and the same amount of cache available to it. When it comes to the standard non-X3D side, the frequency CCD, if you will, it's got the frequency of a 9950X non-3D. And those two working in tandem give you the best of both worlds. I mean, $700 though, it's a very expensive CPU. Okay, there we go. See, max speed, 5750. The max speed you get on a 9800 X3D is 5.4 anywhere because that's the X3D side. So the fast side of this is 5750. The X3D side is 5550. So it's faster. That's what numbers are. Okay, I'm only using Ryzen Master so I can show you guys visually the CCDs parking or not parking, because I'll be honest, like I hate Ryzen Master with a passion. Anyway, power profile, I haven't changed any of that because normally you don't want to set your power profile in Windows because of the fact that, or the power plan, because what would happen is if you were to choose high performance, what would happen is it would want to put everything on the non-X3D cache because that's the higher frequency cache, or core. So put everything over there and ignore all of the like X3D stuff. But the driver is supposed to handle that, not the performance power profile. But I'm putting it back on balance because that's the way it's actually recommended to be. We were leaving it on high profile or high power because on the 9800 X3D, it didn't matter. There was no cores for it to hand off to, so, or CCDs, I should say. Now let's go ahead and run a Cinebench here. That was a 44,586. Wow. Okay, so we're in Cyberpunk right now. I have not installed the latest chipset drivers or anything, but it actually does look like out of the box, it is mostly doing what it's supposed to do. You can see the performance CCD is mostly asleep. It could be handling some background tasks right now from Windows. A multitude of things could be happening. But you can see the game threads look like they're all happening over here. So, look at that. As I move the game around, like move around the character here, you can see the activity on this side. Normally though, this would mostly go to sleep and stay asleep. I don't know if this is potentially rollover from the game. I can't see exactly what process that is. So what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna install the new chipset drivers and such and see if it behaves any differently. All right, so we are back. Let's get Ryzen Master going. Oh yeah, look at that. Now it's like fully asleep, which is what I was expecting to see based on all the testing we had done in the past. So it was like working-ish, but not fully working in the way it's intended. Now we saw it spike there for something in the background, and that this CCD should stay asleep as much as possible because anytime it wakes up, it's gonna utilize some of that cache. Now we want the cache to stay available to the X3D side of it, which is the whole benefit of it. So now that you can see with the proper chipset running, the frequency die is staying mostly asleep. Now that means something just opened up in the background that needed activity, but it was a low level type of process. That's why it only went to 600 megahertz and then turned off. Now, as soon as I click out of the game, watch this, boom. It immediately starts putting everything over here, including the game. So this is why I was saying the game mode that exists in, or like turbo mode and game mode that exists in these motherboards that have that one clock feature or that one button feature, basically all it does is disable this side entirely so it doesn't hand off like this. It's also why core parking was a problem for multi-CCD CPUs for a long time because handing off back and forth, that's what would be happening in the background as you're gaming. So this is why the multi-CCD X3D CPUs look so much better this time around because the higher frequency, the better cooling capability because of the inverted design now where the core is on top of the cache instead of the other way around. So as soon as I click back on this should go to sleep, this should wake up fully. There we go. It's probably this that was keeping that up, but yeah, see, it's asleep now. So there we go. Yeah, Borderlands is clearly recognized in the game bar as a game. The other, like the synthetics don't really show up as games. So yeah, it's handling it exactly as is intended. So that was pretty straightforward. I mean, there are ways to fix that. I did a whole video showing you how if it's not core parking, there's ways you can do it without doing the stupid command prompt one. We did the command prompt method and all it did was break it even more where it was only putting games on the non-3D Vcache core. It was like backwards. So in fact, some of the notes were even saying it might take up to 15 minutes of letting the PC just sit here idling before it would start parking properly. But for us, it was instantaneous. It was working right away. Now this system has only ever seen one CPU. If you've taken it and tried to update CPUs a couple times, let's say you got a 7700X, right? And then you were like, okay, I got a new CPU, I got a 9800X or 9700X. And then you're like, oh, now I'm gonna get a 9950X3D because it's finally out and I was just placeholdering these CPUs. Going from multiple CPUs to a 9950X3D might be a problem. But with the new drivers and the new chipset, the way it's designed, that shouldn't be a problem. It just might take a few restarts or a bit of just letting it idle, even with the game running or something, to really sort of let it learn. It's almost like a learning process. What happens now if I go in here and select power profile to high performance though, or the power plan? So I wanna see now if by doing high performance, if it breaks that, because that's one thing that would break it in the past. Maybe. Looks like it handed off some stuff. But this looks like this came down overall. I know I'm just sitting here in the menu, but it is a rendered menu. So let's see now if I go back to balanced. Yep. So there you go. Don't go high performance if you're running a core parking CPU. That's still the case. It does seem to override the whole logic of Game Bar telling the API and the DLL or the driver for the 3D Vcache service to say, hey, we want the most performance possible. Then I guess it doesn't know the difference between gaming performance and other performance. So there you go. Leave it on balanced. As you saw, high performance mode would be the biggest reason you're probably not core parking. Last things we gotta do here. I need to see if we are going to pick up any performance in my RipGN stuff. So although the RipGN video has not gone live yet, the scores are up because that's in real time and the video hasn't gone out yet. So if we look at the 3D Mark Hall of Fame, like I said, 1400KF, 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 right? But you're seeing these 9950Xs were popping up, and that was making me go, wow, frequency might be a thing, which I think told these overclockers, hey, frequency is definitely a thing, which made them start overclocking the CPUs balls to the wall to alleviate any sort of CPU bottleneck whatsoever. In fact, there was only one 9800X3D, two. I'm one of them. There's only two 9800X3Ds in the top 10 when they were all 9800X3Ds in the top 10 for a while there, and then half of them turned into 9950Xs, and now half of them, as you can see, have turned into 1400KF. But I need to see, can I beat a 41872? Okay, so trying to manual overclock the CPU right now with the multi-core stuff is, I hate overclocking AMD, I really do. So all I did right now was just do PBO on. I didn't even do a curve optimizer, just PBO on, which is supposed to help lift the performance up to 200 megahertz. But this will at least allow me to see whether or not we are having any sort of uplift with this CPU. But before I do that, I'm gonna do a custom run in windowed mode, just because I wanna see which cores are being utilized for 3D Mark. So I don't know if it's gonna use the 3D Vcache CCD or the performance CCD. So I want to see which one it's going on. That'll tell me where I care where the frequency goes. If I'm spending time trying to overclock the X3D CCD and it's going on to the frequency CCD, then it's not gonna do me any good. But it also means that I could disable the CCD1 by using game mode here on Ryzen Master, reboot with only a faster 9800X3D and then get more core clock out of it, hopefully. But it looks to me like it's gonna go into performance because That is an unexpected split right there. I'm gonna disable the performance core, try and get as much performance I can out of the 3D V-Cache core and see if that's gonna help. And then we'll end this video. The main purpose of this video was just to see how is the process of putting in a non-core parking CPU into a core parking CPU in my test bench, and is it going to cause me any problems? And so far the answer appears to be not really. Game mode, apply. Yes, restart. All right, so it's about 150 points low. I did get like 41.8 something already, which means I was really only matching my previous score. This is clocked about 100 megahertz higher than my 9800X3D. So if we look at the CPU clock, it's at 5550. I'm running 5450 for the benchmarks that I did that got me on the leaderboard and the RipGN stuff, which you'll see soon. So actually, I think that might have been 5400, to be honest, not even 5450. So the extra 100 megahertz here isn't really helping me at the moment. So it's kind of inconclusive on whether or not the 9950X3D would make sense to be the new XOC CPU. We might try it. I might go back and start playing around 14900K again based on what I'm seeing on the leaderboard. There's a reason why those guys are using that CPU, and it's got to be the clock speed. There becomes a point where the clock speed can become more beneficial than the extra cache, depending on whether or not the program utilizes the cache. But that's a different kind of video than what the point was on this. We can go ahead and call this one pretty solid, being able to switch the type of CPU, and AMD now being able to more on the fly adapt and have the scheduler and the drivers do what they're supposed to do. So that's what I wanted to look at with the CPU, and I'm happy for it. The fact that I'm able to have a 9800X3D and another CPU on the side, like half of a 9950X, is a great thing. The downside, it's $700. Just kind of keeping with the whole grand scheme of things being really expensive. Rip anyone who actually bought these scalped 9800X3Ds at $700+. So kind of sucks to be you, because you could have one of these things eventually, because these might end up being scalped too. I don't know, we'll see. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. 9950X3D, it's definitely a monster as far as we can tell. I mean, the over 44,000 Cinebench score without doing anything except turning on PBO is kind of crazy, to be honest. Usually the X3D stuff like 7950X3D, you took a huge hit in like compute type CPU tasks for the sake of having half of a 7800, or having half the CPU be a 7800 X3D, but they've made huge strides on 9000 series X3D stuff. I just wish we could get the core frequencies even higher, like let's say 6 gigahertz would be awesome. But anyway, I got a lot of tinkering to do to figure out the nuances of what the best kind of setup here would be. I'm gonna have to do curve optimizer, all that sort of stuff. So it's gonna take a while to get that figured out. But I'm gonna be building a different rig for all that because I can't utilize my GPU rig for that. So a whole separate test bench will be put together just for XOC stuff. All right, guys, thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you in the next one.